At this time last week, we were all recovering from the first Seder and getting ready for the second Seder. And one of the things you likely did in preparation for your Seders last week was place a roasted or a hard-boiled egg on your Seder plate. And at my Seders, we not only place eggs on the Seder plate, but we eat eggs in place of karpas because, as my father shares at our Seder table every year, his grandparents were from Hungary and green vegetables had not yet sprouted in their region of Hungary in April, so they used eggs instead of parsley because that's all they had, and because eggs, like parsley, can also function as a symbol of spring. But traditionally, eggs represent one of two korbanot, two sacrificial offerings that were given at the temple in Jerusalem on Pesach. The first, of course, was the Pesach offering, the Paschal offering, which is represented by the zroah, the shank bone on the Seder plate. And the second was the Chagiga offering, the special festival offering which was given at the temple each year on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And the Chagiga offering is represented by the egg on the Seder plate. And the idea of placing an egg on the Seder plate is a relatively recent one in the history of the Seder. It developed only in the 9th or 10th century, which means it's a practice which is just 1,000 years old as opposed to 2,000 years old, like much of the rest of the Seder. And frankly, it's a strange and perplexing custom to place an egg on the Seder plate, especially something that's supposed to represent the Chagiga offering, the holiday offering, because eggs in our tradition, as you may know, function as a symbol of mourning. It's traditional for mourners to eat hard-boiled eggs at the Seudah Havra'ah, at the traditional meal of comfort which is served for family members as they return home immediately following the burial of their loved one. And the round shape of an egg symbolizes the unbroken cycle of life and death, a cycle which has no clear beginning and no clear end. And the Talmud teaches that lentils are also served to mourners because lentils are round with no breaks, so they have nothing that can represent a mouth. And the rabbis of the Talmud teach ma'adasha ein la peh, af avel ein lo peh. Just as lentils have no mouth, so too do mourners have no mouths. In other words, when we are overwhelmed by grief, there are no words which can adequately or sufficiently express what we are feeling. And sometimes silence is the most effective form of grieving. And the tradition of lentils not having mouths was later applied to eggs, which is one of the reasons that eggs became a symbol of mourning. So the question is, why are eggs, a well-known symbol of Jewish mourning, placed on the Seder plate? And moreover, why do they function as a stand-in for the Chagiga offering, the holiday offering of all things? Jews are not supposed to mourn on holidays, especially at the Seder, because on that night we are supposed to feel joy and fulfillment and freedom, not sadness, not mourning. And I think the reason that we place an egg on the Seder plate is because really it is impossible to have a Seder without mourning. Rabbi Moshe Israelis, the great 16th century legal codifier, teaches that the first night of the Seder always falls on the same night of the week as Tisha B'Av that year. And the night of the first Seder is always the night on which we read Eicha. That night of the week is always the same night of the week we read Eicha, the Book of Lamentations. And some people, you may know, eat eggs just before they begin the fast of Tisha B'Av to represent mourning for the destruction of the temple. So the egg on the Seder plate reminds us that even at our moments of greatest joy and celebration, a sense of national mourning is never far from the collective Jewish consciousness, which of course is precisely the reason we smash a glass at the conclusion of a wedding ceremony. But really, I think we place an egg on the Seder plate for much more personal reasons than that. You can't have a Seder without thinking about those who are not at your Seder table this year. Every year, my grandfather would read Psalm 114 at the Seder table during the Hallel portion of the Seder, and he always had a very distinctive way of reading the line, "The mountains leap like rams, the hills like young lambs." He was very funny in the way he read it. It was very distinctively him, and it always made all of us, all of his grandchildren, laugh. My grandfather has been gone for almost 10 years now, But every year at our Seder, my cousin, his oldest grandchild, reads that psalm in the way that my grandfather used to read it in his memory. It's a small moment of mourning for my grandfather in an evening that is otherwise defined by celebration and joy. And that, I think, is why we have an egg on the Seder plate. Because ultimately the Seder is about memory. It's about sanctifying memory and remembering our history, not only our national history as a people, but also our personal histories, both joy and loss. And by doing so, we deepen and we enrich our celebration of Pesach. As I mentioned earlier, an egg is round, which symbolizes the fact that life really has no beginning and no end. In other words, those who are no longer here are never truly gone. They are with you every year. When you lead your Seder from a wine-stained Haggadah that has been in your family for generations, when you make brisket using your mother's recipe, when you tell your father's terrible Passover jokes at the Seder table, when you use your grandmother's Pesach silverware that is only used for that one special night each year, on Pesach and every day, we remember them. Our God and God of our ancestors, our grief lingers. Part of us is afraid to let go, afraid we will forget. Give us the strength and the wisdom to share the stories of our loved ones with wonder and with joy. Let us pay tribute to their days and their years, and may the memories of those who are no longer here endure as a bracha, as a blessing within our midst. We rise for the beginning of Yizkor on page 330.